Hey, and welcome to GreenPill. Today I've got a medley of contributors from Gitcoin DAO to talk about Grants Round 13 and how you can use Gitcoin grants to fund your project. This is an experiment in a new format in which we have DAO contributors from impact DAO projects coming in to provide a 360 view of the impact their project is having. It's also kind of a deeply personal episode for me because I'm one of the co-founders of Gitcoin, and I get to show off my life's work at Gitcoin and how it can help you, a Web3 enthusiast, raise money for what you're doing or discover the next project that you want to get involved in. So I don't generally like to talk my own book, but we tried to orient this episode around other contributors to Gitcoin DAO and the benefit that Gitcoin DAO and Gitcoin Grants Round 13 can have to you, the listener, with the start of Grants Round 13 on March 9th. So without further ado, I give you Gitcoin DAO talking about Grants Round 13. All right, welcome to GreenPilled. I am here with the Gitcoin crew to talk about Gitcoin Grants Round 13, which starts March 9th. Welcome Lindsey, Thrift, and Kevin Olsen, who are VP Product and VP Engineering at Gitcoin, respectively.
Hey.
Welcome to Scott Moore and Annika Lewis. Scott is a co-founder of Gitcoin, going back with me since 2017, 2018. And Scott and Annika are both Workstream leads at the Gitcoin DAO Public Goods Funding Workstream.
Hey, Kevin. Good to be here.
Hey, all.
Glad to have you.
Same here.
And then finally, Sean McManus of the Memes Merch and Marketing Workstream at Gitcoin DAO is here. Sean, what's up?
Hello. Great to be here.
Great to have you. So I've assembled this crew to talk about Gitcoin Grants Round 13, lucky number 13, which is a way that you can get funding for your impact project. Grants Round 13 is coming up. Annika, what is Grants Round 13 and how can it help founders in the space?
Yes, so Grants Round 13 is our quarterly public goods funding event that we hold at the Gitcoin DAO. Grants Round 13 will feature over $3 million in matching funds for early stage projects in Web3 and beyond. And so effectively, Grants Round 13 is a way for projects to get funding in order to advance their public good that they are building and bringing into the world. And so this is the event that we run every 3 months. Grants Round 12, which was our last grants round, generated over $6 million in public goods funding for early stage projects. And we're excited for Grants Round 13, which we hope to be even bigger and better than Grants Round 12.
Cool. Speaking of bigger and better, what are the stats? How big is the grants round? How much money is going to be flowing around, do we think?
Yeah, so we currently have $3 million committed in matching funds from our generous matching funders. So thank you all for coming on board there. We've got 9 different ecosystem rounds, so different Web3 ecosystems that are really looking to use public goods funding to build their ecosystems and grow their communities. And in addition, we also have 3 cause rounds this time around. So beyond Web3, we're starting to support social causes, and we've got rounds around climate change, human longevity, and also a special round this time around for Ukraine, which we'll talk a little bit more about later.
Awesome. Scott, I'm wondering if you could take us a deep dive on how Quadratic funding works and why it's so powerful for allocating those millions of dollars in matching funding.
Absolutely. And I think actually what's super important about the way Quadratic funding works, which Annika kind of mentioned, is that it can be used for really any cause. We don't need this to be something just for Web3. It can be something for the world and public goods at large. And that's something that I think is going to be an increasing theme, probably even throughout what we're talking about today. But ultimately, Quadratic funding is just a democratic way to allocate a matching pool according to the preferences of a given community. So the goal is to understand what do people care about and why do they care about it? And most importantly, how much do they care about it, with their actual dollars being a metric for how much is actually distributed from matching funders. So as Annika mentioned, we have $3 million in the pool from a generous group of donors. We have ENS, Yearn, the Ethereum Foundation has historically been one of our largest supporters, and a host of others, including actually even some just large anonymous individuals who have been willing to donate to our causes and to public goods at large. And the way it works essentially is that you can imagine you won't have to in a second, we'll do this round actually over the next 2 weeks, but over the 2-week period, a number of people will donate, ideally, and usually I think it's in the range of, Annika, correct me if I'm wrong now, 50,000 or so people, which is honestly staggering to me considering what we were looking at in Grants Round 1 and 2. But ultimately, that group is deciding where the matching pool funds go. So basically, over those 50,000 donations, we're learning effectively what people care about, and we're kind of like effectively donating those funds according to those preferences. So I'll pause there, but hopefully that helps.
I will burst your bubble, Scott, and say it was 27,000 unique contributors back in GR12, but hopefully we can hit that 50K number this Grants Round 13.
Let's go.
Yeah. What I think is so cool about quadratic funding, which is an idea from Vitalik Buterin and Glenn Weil, is that the preferences of the poor and the many matter more than the rich and the few. So if two grants raise the same amount of money, but the second grant raised it from way more contributors, that second grant will get way more of the matching funds. So we've built a matching algorithm to distribute that $3 million ish based off of the preferences of the little people in the ecosystem relative to bag size. So I think that that's what is really exciting about quadratic funding to me. How can we use quad? So say you're a DeFi founder, NFT founder working on a project in the space. How can you leverage Grants Round 13 in order to get funding for your project?
Yeah, and on the grantee side, so in order to get funding, you can go to gitcoin.co/grants and click on the application. There's a grant application you can walk through. It's pretty straightforward, much simpler than your typical charity grant application for those of you who are familiar with the not-for-profit space. But go on there, check out the eligibility policies for the different rounds, and apply for a grant. And it's definitely not too late to apply for Grants Round 13. There's still lots of time. So on the grantee side, that is where to get started. If you are a project that is looking to build your ecosystem and grow your community and give back to public goods, generally speaking, you can also come on board as a matching funder. It's not too late for that either. So definitely reach out to us if that's of interest. And finally, if you're just, a Web3 citizen like all of us and interested in, seeing certain projects advance, definitely, exercise your vote in quadratic funding. So as Scott mentioned, quadratic funding is effectively voting with your dollars on where you want to see the matching pool funds go across all of these thousands of projects. So definitely go to gitcoin.co/grants, browse through the interface, see what's there, and contribute to public goods, because public goods are good.
Public goods are good. So speaking of the Grants Round 13 round, I'm noticing that we've kind of grown the main round, the Ethereum round, vertically over the first couple rounds of Gitcoin grants, and now we're expanding out into doing DeFi ecosystem rounds and longevity rounds and climate change rounds. And the one that piqued my interest here is the growth of a Ukraine round, which is obviously a very hot topic right now. Can we talk a little bit about the Ukraine round and what kind of grants are going to be in that, what those funds can be used for?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Ukraine round arose actually out of an immediate need, and I think anyone listening is probably familiar with the crisis that's arisen there over the past few, it feels like months, but actually I think it's even a little bit less time than that since everything sort of emerged. And we had a lot of matching funders reach out to us figuring out, they want to support effectively as much as they can, and I think everyone does right now. And they wanted to figure out what the most effective way was to do that. And ultimately, we decided that based on what we'd seen with other projects we worked with, I personally have been helping a little bit with Unchained Fund. I know other folks have been helping out with things like GreenPill. We wanted to figure out how we can rally the Gitcoin community towards projects that are effectively on the ground doing work directly around humanitarian aid and around journalistic freedom in this case. So we have a number of projects that are specifically from groups like the Giving Block, who have been doing really great work towards this cause over the last, even I'd say, 6 months to a year on the ground in various regions. And we have another group of projects from Endowment, which I would shout out to as a very kind of cool, I guess, almost fiscal host for a lot of these projects. The other groups of projects are actually on the ground emergent projects that arose from the crypto ecosystem directly. So GreenPill being one of those, Unchained Fund being one of those. And again, our focus is on non-military humanitarian aid instead of focusing on sort of what role anyone should be taking in the conflict itself. But the support from matching funders has been massive. We have about 700,000 committed so far, and we're hoping to see that grow up to hopefully 1 million by the time the round ends.
Amazing. Such an important cause and a novel use of crypto in order to support those who are suffering because of the war in Ukraine. Thanks, Scott. So it seems like Gitcoin Grants is growing out horizontally from the main Ethereum round and then growing out to ecosystem rounds and then cause rounds. I'm curious, and after Grants Round 13, it seems like these rounds run every single quarter. Say in Grants Round 14, I'm building a project and I want to leverage Quadratic funding in order to help build the ecosystem around my project. Sean, can you say a little bit more about the offering that Gitcoin is giving to DeFi founders and to project founders around growing ecosystems with Quadratic funding?
Definitely, yeah. So we recently announced Gitcoin Aqueduct, which is a way for ecosystem builders to implement Quadratic funding with a single line of Solidity code. So it essentially allows you to solve for two things. One is supporting your builder community, and the second is around building a strong and sustainable ecosystem. We're really excited that Tally has decided to partner up with us and become one of our first partners for Aqueduct. Tally Wallet is creating an open source wallet for that is like community owned, and that value is very important to them. And so they've instantiated this Aqueduct even prior to the formation of their token and of their DAO.
All right, very cool. So one of the things I think is really neat is how, as Quadratic funding grows, how the matching pool kind of just stacks as more and more causes and ecosystems are added to Gitcoin. And we've seen that on Gitcoin grants, because of Quadratic funding, the like a $1 contribution can be worth $100 in matching. Coin Center even had $1,000 in matching for a $1 contribution because of Quadratic funding, and I think that's because in Grants Round 12 it was in the main round, and it was also in one of the side rounds at once. So we saw this kind of like effect where one round is like a is like a fan that creates a force for funding public goods, but when you stack the rounds on top of each other, it's like a jet engine that creates this insane matching multiple. And so you're saying that founders can email founders founders of projects can email founders at gitcoin.co and get hooked up with their own Quadratic funding round that way. Is that right, Sean?
Yeah, so if any ecosystem partners are looking to create an aqueduct in order to automate their public goods funding going forward and plan it into their general quarterly rounds, they can go ahead and email us at founders@gitcoin.co, and we can help take you through the next steps.
Thanks, Sean. So, Scott, since you're my co-founder from back in the day on Gitcoin, I want to zoom out a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit about the mission of Gitcoin. What is Gitcoin? Why do we run these rounds? What do we believe that causes us to work on this insane Quadratic funding formula and to organize these rounds? So, I guess I'll just ask this: what is the mission of Gitcoin, and how does it drive what we do?
I feel like it's actually being the central point, the North Star of what we've done for so long. And it's kind of amazing because when you look at a lot of organizations as they shift towards DAOs, they often change. There's often changes in priorities, changes in sort of focus. And I think we've always been focused on impact and focused on trying to grow and sustain public goods throughout Web3 to start, admittedly, and now, of course, kind of expanding into public goods in the real world, the physical world as well. And that sort of mission of growing and sustaining public goods, especially digital public goods, has been sort of a center point in this larger picture of creating impact. And I actually think you've done a really good job of framing what it is that we mean by impact and what it means for a DAO to be kind of an impact DAO. And I would highly recommend actually people check out a post on the Gitcoin forum, gov.gitcoin.co, that kind of goes through some of these pieces in terms of what it means to create impact and how we can actually, kind of in the way that we were talking about with these different rounds, stack together impact from different like pluralistic values to create one sort of larger scale, almost transformer-esque, sort of Megazord type structure. I think that reference might be a bit dated for folks now, but the idea though of kind of creating that structure and acting as almost a Schelling point, right, for these sorts of different pluralistic values to come together and act in one sort of consistent way, I think is really important because it's actually, and it's very timely in the context of the situation in Ukraine. It's something we've seen nation states and these even supranational bodies fail to do for so long. And that's actually kind of coming to a head now with crypto donations to Ukraine in the context of crypto actually in many cases donating more than other UN bodies or other larger institutional bodies in the real world. And it's actually something that to me makes me very optimistic for the future versus I think it's very easy to get kind of bogged down in pessimism in that sort of framing of things. But we have these global coordination tools, and I think it's possible for us to look at sort of this, kind of kernel of a mission of growing and sustaining open source software and digital public goods, and how that's blossomed into this broader vision of impact across these different pluralistic, overlapping circles or communities, sort of as you called them. And it's really interesting just to see how that's sort of been its own sort of way to solve global coordination problems in a way that wasn't possible before. So, yeah, I'll pause there, but I think that's a really important kind of mission, and I'm glad to be supporting it.
So we started off funding open source software and have since diversified into a more pluralistic view of public goods. All sort of sub-public goods are good. And luckily, Quadratic funding, which worked on open source, works in all these other ecosystems. And one of the things that I think that we've really been trying to design into Gitcoin from the start is to be a channel where greater combinations of strength and intelligence can come together to coordinate these outcomes for public goods. And one of the things that I want to zero in on there is that credible neutrality. So it's not Scott's preferences or Kevin's preferences that inform what gets funded. And part of the reason why we're doing this episode on Bankless and on GreenPill is to get people to come out here and express their preferences of what that they want to see funded. And even a dollar makes an impact. Well, this is a crypto podcast, so even a DAI makes an impact. And I want to talk about that credible neutrality. So we're trying to build a vessel for those greater combination of strength and intelligence to come together. And that was kind of the idea behind the launch of GitcoinDAO, which is a more credibly neutral institution to shepherd forward our values. Can you tell us about GitcoinDAO and sort of how that credible neutrality is important in how Gitcoin is governed?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to hear actually Annika's take specifically on sort of the public goods funding workstream's role in this. But my view, just very quickly, is that ultimately the DAO is, in a sense, this kind of culmination of these different pluralistic communities, which have all come together, right now sort of under one banner, but increasingly under a constellation of banners to push forward this mission of digital public goods and broader public goods in the world at large. I think principal sort of thing to think about is just, how does a DAO actually operate? A DAO is kind of a non-hierarchical, individual contributor, initiative-based way to kind of come to consensus about and start to execute on like a given North Star mission. Ideally, in my view, the mission is actually a key part. There's lots of DAOs that like don't have a key mission, and I think those will tend to over time do worse than DAOs where there is that central mission. So ultimately, to me, I think the vessel comment that you made is actually very accurate. The DAO is a kind of vessel for pushing forward public goods, and it's a vessel that's coming together from many different work streams that have kind of emerged relatively organically and relatively kind of swiftly to think of different ways to solve this broader problem. And it's almost, I think the most emblematic example of how this has come together is almost the broader refi movement, which I think at this point is honestly well beyond, Kevin, like when, as far as I understand, you like kind of came up with the meme of regenerative finance like 2 years or so ago, and it started to sort of slowly propagate.
That's nice of you to say, but the Regen Network, I just have to say, was way before me. I've just been involved in propagating it. Yeah,
that's true. Greg actually, yeah, shout out to Greg, who's been, I think, honestly, one of the most, probably even I forgot about Regen Network sort of like being the first in that place. And I think that the work that they're doing both in Cosmos and beyond is really important. Definitely check out Regen Network. They're also a sponsor, I believe, for Grants Round 13 and have been a huge supporter. That broader pluralistic sort of, I guess, structuring of these work streams from the ground up, though, is, I think, really what it comes down to. But I would love, actually, before I keep kind of going on about it, rambling a bit, Annika, I would love your thoughts about, from the PGF side, how we're thinking about this.
Yeah, I would say overall, big +1 on everything you said around kind of the DAO and the intent there and the structure. I think from a public goods funding perspective, it's been really interesting to see since first getting involved with the DAO kind of early last summer to now and seeing, how grants is run in a more DAO native way. We definitely still have a ways to go. I think initially, having some of the grants program centralized and kind of starting to stand things up and going from 0 to 1 was probably the right structure back then. But now, as Kevin said, we really want to move towards a world of more credibly neutral systems and kind of, consent-based governance at scale. and just bringing in the community to decide how we run these rounds, as opposed to it being done kind of top down, hand of God from one or two people in a centralized way. So very tactically for us in the public goods funding workstream, that has meant over time doing a lot more kind of public facing governance posts and snapshot posts around the structure of the round and bringing in the community to make those types of decisions. We definitely still have a long way to go in terms of getting to the level of decentralization that we would like to, but it's all coordination. The process is iterative, and we're definitely on our way there. So really excited for what the future of the DAO holds in terms of these grants programs and executing on the big vision that we have ahead.
Totally. So we're a coordination tool for the ecosystem that is itself trying to coordinate into becoming a DAO at this time.
Certainly. Yep.
One of the fun things that I think about that is, okay, so Gitcoin Grants is on its 13th round. The first one was in January 2019, totally run centralized. And then in May of 2021, we launched GTC, which is the governance token, governs how we handle fraud on the network, how we size and allocate the rounds. And so we started to decentralize the governance. And with the launch of the Gitcoin DAO in GTC, GTC is a governance token. And there's different layers of decentralization that we've been working on as we embark on this long journey of turning a company into a DAO, or I guess the grants part of the company into the DAO, and then turning our centralized platform into a protocol. So I want to end by talking a little bit about Grants 2.0 and our vision to turn Gitcoin Grants into a credibly neutral protocol and the decentralization. I think that's the kind of like feather in our cap when it comes to really becoming a DAO and becoming decentralized. So Kevin Olsen and Lindsey Thrift, what is Grants 2.0 and why is it important?
Yeah, what is Grants 2.0? Well, it's the version that came after Grants 1.0.
Easy. Okay, back in.
That's to say that the centralized version of grants that we're running on today served the purposes we needed at the time when we were figuring out, was there a space for quadratic funding where people were going to use this? You mentioned at the beginning that vertical scaling that we went through of the main round. And now we've had multiple rounds to test out what we've kind of been referring to as horizontal scaling, but the testing of all these other rounds, now with Tally coming on and Aqueduct, it's super clear to us that there is an appetite to run your own rounds, to really like hold the future of your own ecosystem and project in your hands and be able to continuously fund and grow that. And very simply, Grants 1.0, the first centralized version, doesn't serve the purpose of giving everyone the sovereignty they need to run the rounds for their programs and to scale over time. So Grants 2.0 is our vision to take quadratic funding and really just public goods funding. Like, we're using quadratic funding today, but there's multiple other mechanisms existing and emerging that you could use to allocate funds as well. So it's our vision for taking public goods funding to the world, where there's thousands of rounds running at any time. And it's really us going from fishing for you, giving you a fish. Here's what you need to start your project. Looks like you scaled. Let's give you 3 fish, to actually just teaching you to fish, equipping you with all the tools that you need. So we're taking our current product. We spent the last 3-4 months or so really going deep on what exists there today, what's the problem statements we're solving for, what are the domains that have emerged within that product, and what goes with us into the future and into the decentralized future. So we're headed down a path where we'll have a decentralized protocol that's composed of a few different components, which we'll get into in a bit. But the spirit of us, we want to be fully open source, build in a way that a marketplace can emerge. There can be plugins for different mechanisms. You can choose how you govern your own rounds. Gitcoin will have opinions about how we govern ours, but that'll continue to expand and grow over time. So I don't want to steal too much of the thunder. Kevin Olsen has been a fantastic partner in us figuring out what's this architecture look like. But that's our vision. Let's be decentralized. Let's give everyone the tools they need to run and govern their own rounds.
Great. Kevin Olsen. First off, cool name, KO. Second off, what's Grants 2.0?
Oh man, I mean, Lindsey, that was amazing. Well done. So it's going to be a couple things, right? So the first thing we're starting off with is figuring out decentralized identity, right, and proof of personhood. So we're going to start off with Depop. That's going to be our first component that we're going into, and we're really excited kicking that off like next week. So no pressure, getting going. And then beyond that, we're with like these domains that Lindsey was talking about, we're getting into kind of the components we take to run around, right? So we're getting into like where a grant publisher is sort of the self-sovereign person. You build a grant, you publish that out onto a decentralized data layer, right? We're still investigating exactly what that looks like. But then we're building on top of that all of the operations that we are bringing to bear and making sure that our partners can take that on themselves. The round manager. And then lastly, for the public, the Grant Explorer experience is something that, again, the round owners will be able to kind of customize and tailor to their needs. So we're really envisioning kind of this end-to-end, what it takes to run a round, to fund it, to make that available to a community, and then for folks to explore those, and then also to fund them.
I think a big part of that I'm excited about to make sure we highlight is that we're really doubling down on the actors in the grants ecosystem, right? There's like, I am a grantee, I own my project. And by having the grants publisher be its own part of this ecosystem, you can take that from round to round. You can take your project to any round that's aligned to the vision and mission of your project, and source funding there. So today it's stacked in our centralized system, but it should stack and spread over time as these rounds scale. And then same for round manager. If you're a DAO that's looking to spin up your own grants program, you will be able to decide what mechanisms you use for choosing eligibility, what's important and to the values of your community. How do you want to do that? It won't be decided based on the eligibility requirements and the process and practice of Gitcoin. We'll still be here to offer best practice and share with you how we're doing it, but you'll have the opportunity to run the rounds you want to, whether that's annually, weekly, monthly, whatever you decide works for your ecosystem. And then how do you decide who's eligible? Who gets to participate in that decision making? Do you have your own token that you're using utility for making those decisions? So there'll be so much opportunity for focusing in then on these parties as they run. And then the Grant Explorer being the interface or the front door that we all have, hoping that we create some commonality. So as someone who is a Web3 citizen, going around wanting to allocate your funds to projects you care about, you have something you recognize, you know how to move about these rounds and allocate your funds where you want them to go.
All right, very cool. Well, while I've got you here and we're all public, doing this in public and building in public, I want to raise my hand to the sky and say, sorry for building it centralized to start.
Yeah.
And Lindsey and Kevin, thank you for cleaning up the mess. Really excited about taking all the things we've learned from Grants 1.0 and putting them into Grants 2.0. Anything else to say about Grants 2.0?
No, man, just excited. It's going to be a really exciting journey, getting to meet a lot of the ecosystem, So if you're interested, come talk to us. I mean, we have so many people who are building in similar spaces. We want to learn from you. Get in touch.
Cool.
I would love to just step in and just kind of highlight some of the power I see in Grants 2.0 as Lindsey and Kevin articulated it. Like, there has not been anything like this before as a grantee, right? So just very tactically, like, let's say you're building a really early stage DeFi project and you want to get grant funding. Right now, you would probably go out to 15 different grant programs and submit 15 different grant applications. What the idea of what Lindsey and Kevin have articulated is you could just do one grant application and automatically be routed to all of these different grants rounds that you might be eligible for, whether Uniswap wants to fund your grant, Polygon, Coinbase, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, the power here in kind of the protocol and the standardization from a grantee perspective is just massive. And I think in the context of, charity funding, grant funding, NGOs, all of kind of the structures there, I don't think we've seen anything quite like this. So major shout out to what you're building here.
Yeah, super exciting.
There's an amazing, actually, just very quick analogy that I heard, which is that the ecosystem rounds are kind of the bays, and the main pool and the main round that we're running is the ocean. And you can just imagine that these things all eventually flow back to this larger pool. I just think it's like really kind of beautiful to think about the way in which this is kind of its own, like when we say ecosystem, I think we often think mechanically, but it is really almost in a ecological sense, kind of an ecosystem, a mycelial almost network of projects that are coming together. Just awesome. Sean, I saw you were going to jump in. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I also wanted to stress just one thing, just to contextualize where we are, I think, in this funding journey. Like, it's, most people, it's not the first thing that they do, that they join Web3 and they start funding public goods. This is still a fairly niche thing. In the last round, we had 26,000 people donate, which is incredible. But there's over 21 million MetaMask wallets right now. So right? It's still a very, very small percentage. So I think what's critical is that everyone who does donate and who has done this in the past talks to a few of their friends about it, right? Not just your crypto friends, but also some others. I would love to see a day when we have people getting a wallet in order to fund and support public goods.
Word. All right, Scott, you gave me an idea. Grants 2.0 launch party near the ocean, just to hit home that ecosystem metaphor.
Love it.
You guys know I'm
Let's go.
partial to mountains, but we can go to a beach for this. All right. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you all want to say about Grants Round 13, Gitcoin grants? And if not, we can start to wrap.
Maybe the only thing I would quickly mention is that we kind of talked about the DAO, and I think we talked about the idea of people getting involved. But if you really practically do want to help with this mission, if you want to see how sort of everything works internally and is made, I think it's very, there are a few options. And I would say, one, check out gov.gitcoin.co. Really quickly, I kind of mentioned that before. But two, just check out our Discord, discord.gg/Gitcoin. There's a lot of great stuff happening there from a lot of different people. There's community events, I think, like multiple times a week across all these different work streams. So I just had to shill, but if you want to get involved, definitely check that out.
For sure. Come help curate the vibes. All right. So any other calls to action? Say you're a project founder looking to set up a grant or looking to discover new projects in the ecosystem. Where can you go?
Gitcoin.co/grants. So if you're looking to start one up, click the application button and go through the application process. If you're looking to browse, you can filter by all sorts of different types of grants and see what public goods you might want to fund in Grants Round 13.
Alrighty. Well, thanks so much, Gitcoin crew, for being on the show, and very excited for Grants Round 13. Peace and love.